The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
The shutdown of O'Hare and Midway airports canceled thousands of flights and cost tens of millions of dollars. The devastating work of a single arsonist raises new questions about the security of our most critical facilities. Plus, this doctor's remedies are music to the ears for the injured and needy in Chicago and across the country. And Chicago cancer specialists and their patients make critical breakthroughs fighting the deadliest forms of the disease. We get the latest prognosis on this week's edition of In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Chris Bury. Tonight, a closer look at the fight against cancer and the role Chicago doctors, researchers, and patients are playing in that battle. According to the National Cancer Institute, more than 40% of all adults will be diagnosed with cancer. But people with the disease are living longer thanks to new therapies and treatments. Tonight, Barbara Pinta reports on a Chicago area woman who is beating the odds with the help of her medical team.
When I was singing at the Cubs game, it just felt like I was flying. It was just incredible.
It's incredible that Ginger Tam of suburban Wilmette is even alive today, let alone singing the national anthem at Wrigley Field. 3.5 years ago, this talented singer was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, a disease very few people survive. Her symptoms began innocently enough. A persistent cough her doctors tried to treat with antibiotics.
They just finally decided they should do an x-ray, and when they did, it came back, they came into the room and just said, "Do you have any family with you?" And I said, "You know what?" And they said, "It looks like metastatic disease, and there's just so much of it."
Ginger says her first thoughts were of her young daughter. After hearing the devastating news, Ginger went home and prayed, and then called a friend who happened to know a doctor at Rush University Medical Center. That doctor turned out to be a lifesaver, Dr. Phil Bonomi, director of hematology at Rush.
He is an angel. He just dedicates his life to finding a cure for lung cancer, for treating people, and just has the best bedside manner. And he just doesn't give up hope. I said they can ask me to hug you 1,000,000 times. That's fine with me. Okay. Isn't it good?
Dr. Bonomi has been working in the field of lung cancer treatment and research for nearly 40 years. At the start of his career, surviving lung cancer was almost unthinkable. But in the last decade, researchers studying the tiniest molecules have made huge breakthroughs.
Solving the human genome, identifying the different genes, figuring out different things that drive the tumors, because it's different in different patients.
Doctors can now individualize therapies for each patient. In Ginger's case, genetic testing found her cancer had what is called an EGFR mutation. Doctors started treating her condition with an EGFR inhibitor, a targeted drug administered under clinical trial in Denver.
Within a week of taking the drug, I felt better.
For instance, Ginger's scan here, we see this is her backbone, this is some of her blood vessels, and these right lung and left lung. Here's a tumor mass, and here's a tumor mass. And now that she's been started on the third-line EGFR inhibitor, both are gone.
Dr. Bonomi is thrilled with the results. That's because lung cancer has been among the deadliest forms of the disease, with only a 17% survival rate.
The disease is being converted to a chronic illness. We're controlling the cancer. The first treatment works, second treatment works, the third treatment works.
Talk about it as a miracle.
It is a miracle.
New research is unlocking new weapons to fight other cancers. Cardinal Francis George is undergoing experimental treatment at the University of Chicago for cancer in his bladder and kidney. The new drug activates the body's own immune system to destroy cancer cells. Dr. Bonomi believes these immunotherapies are the next frontier in the fight against cancer.
immune system is not so defective, but the cancer cells can kind of put an invisible shield around themselves. So if the tumor cell, or the good cells, the lymphocytes trying to kill the cancer, are coming towards the tumor cell, they lock up with this protein, they can't get to it. These antibodies block that protein and allow them to get to the tumor cell and kill it.
Another Chicagoan turning the tide against cancer is only 19 years old. While working at a Rush University lab, Kevin Stonewall developed an experimental colon cancer vaccine, effective in mice. The vaccine could eventually be tested on humans. Ginger Tam says putting cancer in the national spotlight is important for raising awareness and raising money for research. She hopes her efforts will help erase the stigma of lung cancer, pointing out that nearly 20% of those diagnosed with the disease have never smoked.
I'm a single mom. I have an 11-year-old daughter. She watches TV and she says, Mommy, how come they do so much for breast cancer and not anything for lung cancer? She doesn't get it. And I don't get it, frankly.
Joining us with more information is Dr. Jyoti Patel. She is an associate professor of medicine at Northwestern Medicine, a thoracic oncologist, and a spokesperson for the American Society of Clinical Oncologists. Dr. Patel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
In your mind, when you look at the scope of cancer research, what are the biggest advances that we've seen in the treatment of cancer?
I think when we sort of look at the wide variety of advances we've made in the past several years, it really is heartwarming to see that not only have we made strides in precision medicine, in understanding the genetic underpinnings of a cancer and translating that to targeted therapy for patients. We've learned a lot about the immune system and the promise of immune-mediated therapies. We're learning more about screening and prevention, and we're learning a lot about survivorship.
When you look at cancer and you look at the different varieties of cancer, what makes this disease so difficult to fight?
I think one of the challenges in treating cancer is that we, for years, have thought that people have a cancer, but what we're learning is that every cancer is unique and every individual has an individual cancer. So it may be that we find the genetic marker that is causing a cancer in a particular person on that day. Even if we target that tumor with the right medicine, maybe in 4 months, maybe in 6 months, the body and the cancer somehow find redundant pathways by which to overcome even very targeted therapy.
So like a virus, it finds its way around the therapy?
Exactly, exactly. And there are multiple pathways that are redundant. Cancer is a tough opponent. It is persistent, and despite shutting it down for some time, it can become resistant to current therapies. And so looking at not only the cancer, but also the body's response to cancer, I think is the next sort of frontier in how we can defeat the cancer.
Talk about genetics. I know there's a big push toward genetic testing. It's become big business, and we know some about that. But do we have enough information to really give people answers when they get these genetic tests for cancer?
So there are two kinds of genetic testing. One is genetic testing on a cancer that's already formed, so testing the tumor tissue to target a particular therapy, and those genetics or those mutations are innate to the tumor itself and generally don't have relevance to patient's offspring or to the rest of their family. So for that, we can say genetic testing is absolutely paramount, and we think that it's initial diagnostic testing for patients with many advanced cancers so we can get the right therapy. The other testing that you're talking about is to look to see whether there is a genetic syndrome which puts you at risk for developing cancer. And certainly in this world of talking about BRCA mutations or family cancers such as Lynch syndrome, absolutely it's important that we look at a person's particular risk and their risk of developing cancer not in the next year but over 2, 3, 4 decades.
When you look at the new treatments and therapies for cancer, we've heard about weaponizing the HIV virus to fight cancers or developing vaccines out of tumor cells to fight cancers. As an oncologist, aside from genetics, what excites you the most about therapies that are in the pipeline?
So certainly As you mentioned, I think precision therapy and finding the right molecule to turn off a protein is probably the most exciting. But how we can use that hand in hand with the body's own immune system is really where my excitement is today. We are learning more and more about how cancers overcome immune surveillance. And we have known for a long time that there's some cancers like renal cell cancer and melanoma that you can treat with an immune strategy. Just more recently, though, in the past several years, we've seen some great strides with lung cancer, for example. So it may be that we can unleash the body's immune system to track down when those cells are really in a minimal residual state. So if you have a great response with chemotherapy or with a targeted agent, it may be that using one of these newer drugs that target the programmed death pathway, the PD-L1 pathway, could really lead to some impressive responses and some durable responses.
Dr. Patel, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We now go to Chris and a look at this week's headlines.
Thank you, Barbara. Millions of dollars lost because of the O'Hare and Midway shutdown. President Obama comes home, and we're saying goodbye to Chicago's Sausage King. An arson in Aurora paralyzes air travel. A disgruntled contractor is accused of setting a devastating fire at the FAA Radar Center. But where was the backup plan?
It is extraordinarily disconcerting that one person who is a contractor can basically take out aviation in the Midwest. Very troubling.
The race for governor appears to be a dead heat, while the candidates blast away at each other's tax plans. A stay-out-of-jail card for marijuana users. Mayor Emanuel is pushing lawmakers to decriminalize small amounts of pot and clear county jail for more serious offenders.
I think we could save a lot of money in our system if we decriminalize marijuana.
And if you've got the munchies, Chicago's most famous hot dog stand is on its last legs. The long goodbye for hot dogs.
I think it's about 4.5 hours, going on 5 hours at this point. My blood sugar is extremely low.
Sad to see it go. I've been coming here for a number of years, and it's a true Chicago institution.
Now joining us to chew on all of these stories are Michael Puente, reporter for WBEZ, Mike Coolidge, head of the syndicated Michael Coolidge Show, and Janelle Frost, managing editor for the Chicago Defender. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
So let's start at the airport. We've had more than 4,000 flights canceled since last week after this arson. What does this say, Michael, about our vulnerabilities to this kind of thing?
I think it says a lot. I mean, especially since if it happened just in Chicago, you got to think other centers around the country are just as vulnerable. I mean, the contractor knew where to hit, where to strike, but there has to be systems in place to see that that doesn't happen. I mean, I was just in Gary at the airport yesterday to see Barack Obama fly in, and Mayor Rahm Emanuel was not happy about that. He wants to see his O'Hare Airport and Midway fully functioning, and that's not happening right now.
And Mike, does Rahm Emanuel have a point here?
He does, but what's so alarming about this particular incident was the fact that it really didn't have a point to it. This wasn't like a terrorist who was trying to accomplish something or to get a message across. It was just a really depressed guy, it sounds like, who had access to stuff that could do a lot of damage nationwide. And exactly what Michael said, it's alarming that there was no backup plan. And it just shows you what one guy can do. And hundreds of millions of dollars we're talking about the airlines lost in this. Something needs to be done.
And Janelle, if one guy can do this, what if it was an organized group of terrorists?
Yeah, I think it definitely speaks volume to the fact that, you know, there is that possibility if you see that one individual was, you know, able to accomplish this. And as, you know, Mike said, that wasn't even his intentions. I mean, that just speaks to the mental state of him because he, you know, was not hoping that it would have that magnitude of what he did. So it definitely raises a lot of, you know, questions about security, airport security, when we see that one individual was able to do this. And, you know, when we just think back, you know, to terrorist, you know, possibility and the fact that, you know, we have seen that with 9/11, then I think that there needs to be a lot of things addressed about security and how we can, ensure that something like this can't ever happen again.
In terms of the backup plan, go ahead, Mike.
Well, yeah, we got to keep in mind too that this is a guy who had access. He had a card that he needed to go in. Like none of the three of us could walk into the facility that he could and go to the basement and use the gasoline and all that stuff that he did. So I hesitate to jump to the conclusion that everybody screwed up here. I think the giant screw up is the fact that only one facility in Aurora, Illinois, affected the entire nation. This could have, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are taking note of this, bad people who want to do a lot of damage and say, hey, we just need to do the same thing in Atlanta or Dallas or the other big hubs, and we can really shut down America for a couple days.
Well, down here on the ground, let's talk about a very close race. Polls are out now in the governor's race between Bruce Rauner and Pat Quinn, and a new poll, or compilation of polls from Real Clear Politics, shows that it's a statistical dead heat, that Bruce Rauner is just a hair over 42%, Pat Quinn right at 42%. And Michael, you surprised at how close this race is?
I am surprised because early on, Illinois is a Democratic state. You would think Pat Quinn would be far ahead, but Rauner is giving him a tough fight, and especially with the tax plan now. It's not often you see an incumbent, pushing for a tax hike, well, the permanent tax that he wants, but I could see why Pat Quinn wants that, because it is helping to reduce Illinois' unpaid bills. It's gone from $9 billion to right around, I think, $5 billion. So that says a lot about that tax plan. But, I can see why Rauner doesn't want it to be permanent.
I just think the way that this tax plan went through, I think you don't need to be a Republican or a Democrat to be infuriated with how this temporary tax increase went through in early 2011, when you had two legislators, one of whom got a job with the prison board afterwards, and another one who was a legislator for an entire week, who didn't have to answer to the constituents. The vote passed without a vote to spare, and now Pat Quinn has been pretty open about saying, yep, if I get reelected, I'm going to make this tax increase permanent during the lame duck session, when legislators do not have to answer to their constituents.
Well, you're right. He has been very clear that he is okay with this tax increase being made permanent, probably after the election in January. Janelle?
Well, I think that, as a taxpayer, none of us want to see, increases in our taxes. So the fact that he's talking about making this permanent, while we have a lame duck Congress there, it does raises questions because of the fact that you're talking about members that are not going to be seated there, anymore. So it's kind of like, why not wait until we have the new members come in to make the decision. But anytime you're talking about making a tax increase permanent, that's not going to go well with the taxpayers. Understanding that obviously, with the state's budget, things like that is necessary. But it also, raises the question in terms of, are there other options? Can we look at other ways of doing that without necessarily having a permanent tax increase?
Well, Bruce Rauner does have an idea, which is taxes on services, everything from attorneys to consultants to janitorial services. Will this raise enough revenue, though, to plug that $4 billion hole in our budget, I guess is the question, Mike.
That remains to be seen, of course. But that is, again, pushing for what was supposed to be a temporary tax hike to make it permanent. Even, let's say, once the bills are already paid off, you're still going to be stuck with that. That's a hard sell Pat Quinn is trying to make right now, especially in a tight race like that. He's on a slippery slope there.
I think, too, we shouldn't jump to the conclusion that all of this this gap in spending that we need to make up is all worthwhile spending. I think Bruce Rauner said, yes, he is going to make some major cuts if he gets elected governor. And I think we shouldn't automatically say, hey, we racked up these bills, we have to figure out a way to pay for all of them. Well, yes, some of them we do. Some of them we're constitutionally obligated to pay, but there's ways that we can not be such a spend so much and have such a small revenue in Illinois way going forward.
Here in Chicago, meanwhile, the big political news has been Mayor Emanuel suggesting to the state legislature that we decriminalize marijuana down to a misdemeanor for a gram or less. And Janelle, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that when you look at the fact of, there are violent crimes that the focus needs to be on, I think there's some validity to, what the mayor is saying in terms of, having this become a misdemeanor as opposed to a felony. The thing is that, Chicago is already giving people tickets, for it. So when you're talking about your everyday person, when you're hitting them in the pocket, that can have, an impact and effect as opposed to arresting them. And, we already have our, jails crowded as it is. So I think that, if the whole point of it is to, allow law enforcement to focus more on the more serious violent crimes, then I think that, it would be a good idea.
What about the politics of this? Who does this attract, or who does this benefit politically for the mayor? Michael?
Well, I'm not sure who it benefits, but I do say, though, people who are already incarcerated or have a marijuana position, convictions on their record, how are they feeling about this? I mean, if they've already spent time, if it's on their record, are they going to now push to have it expunged? So this is going to have a ripple down effect if this go through. But we are living in times where attitudes toward marijuana use, it's changing. It's becoming more acceptable. We're going to have medical marijuana use pretty soon here. So it's changing times, but it's going to have a ripple effect.
I think that I wish that Mayor Emanuel and other politicians would actually see if policies work. And the ones that work, you keep. The ones that don't, you get rid of. Is legalization of pot in other states and other cities having a negative effect on them? If it is, maybe we should give this a second thought. But if not, maybe the pro-legalization of marijuana people have a point. What's so humorous, though, is that he's supposedly tying this in with more gun legislation.
Well, that's the speculation that this is going to set the stage for the legislature to crack down on gun crimes later on.
Which, to me, makes no sense at all. We actually have empirical evidence now that respecting the rights of people to defend themselves here in Illinois and in Chicago is a positive thing. We've got murder rate and the crime rate going significantly down just since concealed carry became legal here in Illinois. I don't think that's a coincidence, and I think that the answer isn't more gun laws. We've seen that less gun laws actually leads to less crime. Let's not go the opposite way.
Michael?
Well, I think the bottom line is I think it shows that gang members, people who are doing crimes, they don't care about gun laws. So you could institute whatever stringent gun laws you want. Gang members are going to get a hold of guns one way or another. So it doesn't affect them, it affects law-abiding citizens.
Finally, it's time for dinner, but time is running out. Hot Dogs, the legendary hot dog emporium, is closing forever later this week. People have been waiting 10 hours and more for a hot dog. Janelle, worth the wait?
Well, I will say that I've never been to dogs, but I definitely can understand wanting to stand in line, for one of your favorite, food there. I definitely am known for traveling, for food. I love food, so I can definitely understand that. I think it's a little extreme, though, in terms of people talking about paying for, space in line to be able to get the hot dog.
That costs more than the hot dog itself.
Right, exactly.
Considerably more, right?
Mike, there are more than 2,000 hot dog stands in the metro area of Chicago. What made hot dogs stand out among all of those?
Something, apparently. And, I think a lot of this is supply and demand. The fact that people know that they will not ever be able to have a hot dog anymore after this week means that, hey, knock that off the bucket list, and that's why they're standing in line. I think he's got something up his sleeve. I have no evidence of this whatsoever, but he could sell that stand in a couple of weeks and get a pretty penny for it, I think.
Last word on hot dogs to you, Michael.
Two things Chicagoans take serious: pizza and hot dogs.
Yes.
So it's not surprising that hot dogs is just having a frenzy right now. It's too bad he doesn't stay open or have some kind of cross promotion with the iPhone people. It seems like they get
on that note, we'll leave it there and wish Doug Sohn good luck in the next chapter of his culinary career. Thanks to Michael Puente, Mike Coolidge, and Janelle Frost. Chicago has long been synonymous with the blues. Muddy Waters, Willie Dixon, Coco Taylor, Buddy Guy, Bo Diddley, just a few of the legendary names in Chicago blues. One of their most ardent fans has now carved out a blues career of his own when he's moonlighting from his demanding day job.
Blues music is a feeling, and I think the thing that everybody needs to understand, it's not a note, it's how a note makes you feel. It's not a chord, it's what a chord does to your body, and most importantly, it's a groove that kind of shapes the rhythm of your day, of your life. And for me, I can't imagine life without the blues.
For Daniel Chicago Slim Ivankovich, blues has become the backbeat of his life. He co-founded the Chicago Blues All-Stars. Now this giant of a man, he's 6'11", is its lead guitarist. Born in Yugoslavia, Ivankovich grew up listening to and playing classical music. But when he first heard the blues, Ivankovich fell in love.
I was born in a place far from the blues. For my family, leaving Yugoslavia, America was this great place that your dreams could come true. And
one of his dreams did come true, the day he traded his violin for a guitar.
I mean, I was playing music that I had no connection to. The difference was with blues music, they were right here. I could go see Muddy Waters, and that's what was so profound was these blues musicians were bigger than life. It was the personal connection that sucked me into the blues.
At night, Ivankovich regularly plays guitar with his band at Buddy Guy's Legends in Chicago's South Loop. But during the day, he picks up an entirely different set of instruments.
I'm an orthopedic, spine, and reconstructive surgeon. I do trauma, and I do a lot of work with my group in underserved areas of Chicago. We want these knees to last 20 years. That's my goal. So whatever we do here, I want a good knee in you till you're 70. Every day in clinic, somebody comes through our doors that has been incapacitated, that's in a wheelchair. The problem is if you don't have insurance, no one wants you. And in these neighborhoods, if you can't walk, you can't live. The funny thing is that in the course of my training at Cook County Hospital, I had a whole clinic that was devoted to caring for blues musicians that did not have coverage. And it always blew my mind that these musicians were world renowned. I mean, these were guys who were on multiple records, had hits, could go to Europe and play for 10,000 people, yet here in their own city, they were relatively unknown and they didn't even have insurance.
Whether performing surgery, caring for the underserved, or jamming on stage, this doctor/bluesman is on a mission.
The mission of the music and the mission of the medicine really does overlap to the same people, to the same geography, so I don't think it's disconnected. The quote that I always use from Willie Dixon is his song, "I live the life I love, and I love the life I live."
Dr. Daniel Ivankovich, he's one of the featured artists in a new series produced by WYCC called Buddy Guy's Legends Presents the Chicago Blues. Premiering this Friday, October 3rd at 9 p.m., the 12-episode series captures the rich history of Chicago blues with performances by top musicians from around the world, and you won't want to miss it. Well, that wraps up this week's show. Many thanks to Barbara Pinto. I'm Chris Bury. Good night.